Hi, I'm David, and today I'm going to give you something to think about. My weekly devotion this week comes from the book of Daniel over in the 3rd chapter. Let me set the stage for you. It's 597 BC, and Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians have come down and they have taken Judah. This was during the times of the divided kingdom. Israel had already been taken captive by the Assyrians. But now finally the Judites, who had been spared this punishment from God, finally God saw fit that it was time to punish Judah for their rebellion against him. And so Nebuchadnezzar comes down along with the Babylonian army, and they take Judah, and they take away all the leading citizens, especially those who are the family of the king, the royal lineage of David. All the descendants, and they did this for a very good reason, because Nebuchadnezzar knew that, well, if you took all of the king's relatives away from the land that you've just conquered, then it's a lot less likely that there's going to be a rebellion or a revolution against your authority. And so it was probably a good move, politically speaking, for Nebuchadnezzar. Now, among the royal princes who were taken into captivity, there was Daniel, but also there were 3 of his friends as well. And these 3 friends, their names in the Hebrew language was Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now, whenever they got to Babylon, they were made eunuchs, and then they also began training in the language and the arts and the culture of the Babylonians. This was really Nebuchadnezzar's way of trying to get them to forget their culture, forget their nation, forget their language, forget even their religion, okay? And so he gave them, or they gave these 4 young men, these 4 young Hebrews, new names, Babylonian names. In fact, Daniel was called Belteshazzar. The other 3 were called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those were their Babylonian names. Again, this was an effort to get them to leave their Israelite culture behind. Now, they learned all the language and all the wonderful things, and they very quickly became a part of the administration of Nebuchadnezzar over Babylon. They were very helpful to him. But the time came whenever Nebuchadnezzar became real proud of himself. And so he decided he would build a golden image to himself. And he built this incredibly large statue, or perhaps sculpture, which was made of gold. It was 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. That's how massive, how big this monument to Nebuchadnezzar was. And his subjects decided that he should be honored as one of the gods. And so Nebuchadnezzar, he declared that it was a law that any time the band played, and he had this band that had 5 instruments, that whenever the band played, then everyone in Babylon was to worship the Babylonian gods and also worship this image that Nebuchadnezzar had erected in honor of himself. Well, that was a problem for these Hebrew lads, because, of course, they knew that there was only one true living God, and it wasn't Nebuchadnezzar, and it wasn't Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian gods. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego decide they are not going to worship this foreign god, nor are they going to worship Nebuchadnezzar. Well, word gets around to Nebuchadnezzar, and he calls them to him, and he tells them very bluntly, look, whenever the band plays, you need to bow down and you need to worship my gods, and you also need to worship my image as well. And if you don't do this, then I'm going to throw you in the fiery furnace. And then Nebuchadnezzar, in fact, even adds to this, saying this. He says to them this, and who is it that will deliver you from my hands? He even kind of slights Jehovah God there, doesn't he? Well, the interesting thing about these three Israelite boys, and they were probably at the oldest just very young men, maybe 19, 20 years of age. The amazing thing about them is the way they stand up to Nebuchadnezzar. We're told that after Nebuchadnezzar has threatened them, these three young men say to Nebuchadnezzar, their king, reigning over them, the following: "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up." You know, it took an awful lot of courage to stand up to Nebuchadnezzar. But you know something else? It took a lot of faith to stand up to Nebuchadnezzar. Now, I like the fact that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego make it very clear that even if God chooses not to deliver them from the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, that still doesn't mean that he is no less God, okay? In other words, they're prepared to die for what they believe in. You know, that's the very essence of true biblical faith. It's not just, I believe this, but I'm open to subjection. Instead, it's that, hey, look, this is what I believe and I'm willing to die for it. And so most of us know the rest of the story. Nebuchadnezzar goes ballistic and he flies off the handle, and he commands that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than it's ever been before. And he orders that they be thrown into the fiery furnace, and it's so hot that the men that throw them into the furnace die immediately. Well, once it becomes safe enough for Nebuchadnezzar to look inside the furnace himself, he looks inside and he says to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Look, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." 3 went in, and then there were 4. The one would seem to be a son of God. Now, perhaps an angel, or perhaps maybe a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus. We don't know for sure. But what we do know for sure is these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were delivered from the fiery furnace and from the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. Their faith was what saved them. Let me leave you with this thought for this week. Is your faith so great that you would be willing to die for what you believe? Because if it's not, then it's probably not great enough to save you. I'm David, and I hope I've given you something to think about for this week.